Let's begin. But first, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Shattered Hearts Tales. Snow drifted gently from the black winter sky, covering the quiet street in soft white layers. Outside, the world looked peaceful, almost magical, as if Christmas itself had wrapped the night in forgiveness. Inside the house, warm yellow lights from the Christmas tree flickered against the walls, reflecting off glass ornaments and tinsel. Laughter echoed from the living room, mixed with music and the clinking of glasses, but none of it reached the woman standing silently in the hallway. Her husband was busy entertaining guests, smiling loudly, telling stories, playing the perfect host. To anyone watching, he looked happy, successful, fulfilled. Yet his eyes never searched for her. He never noticed her absence from the room, never wondered why she wasn't laughing beside him. Wrapped in conversations and compliments, he remained distant, emotionally unreachable, as cold as the night outside despite the warmth of the house. Down the hallway, the bedroom door was half open. Their young son slept peacefully, his small chest rising and falling under a blanket decorated with cartoon reindeer. She paused beside the bed, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead, memorizing his face as if afraid time might steal it away. Her heart ached, but her hands were steady. Quietly, she packed only what mattered: clothes for her son, important documents, a small toy he couldn't sleep without. Everything else was left behind, including the life she had tried so hard to save. Before leaving, she stopped in the living room doorway. On the wall hung a family photograph from years ago, 3 smiling faces, captured in a moment when love still felt real. She stared at it for a long time. Slowly, she slipped the wedding ring from her finger and placed it beneath the photo, the soft sound of metal against wood louder than the music playing nearby. It was her final goodbye to a promise already broken. There was no argument, no dramatic farewell. She lifted her son gently, wrapped him in a coat, and stepped outside. The cold air stung her face as she closed the door behind her, disappearing into the snowy night. Inside, the husband laughed, unaware that this Christmas night was not just another celebration, but the last night his family would ever be whole. Long before that silent Christmas night, their marriage had once been filled with warmth and belief. In the early days, love came easily. He used to hold her hand as if afraid to lose her, whispering promises about forever, about building a life that would be stronger than anything the world could throw at them. They talked about a home filled with laughter, about raising a child who would grow up surrounded by love. Back then, she believed every word, because his eyes matched his promises. But time has a quiet way of changing people. Slowly, almost invisibly, the warmth faded. Conversations became shorter, then practical, then rare. His attention drifted elsewhere, toward his growing ambitions, his social circle, the image he wanted to project. He stopped listening, stopped asking how her day had been, stopped noticing the tiredness in her eyes. What once felt like partnership slowly turned into coexistence, and even that began to crumble. Control replaced care. He criticized how she spoke, how she dressed, how she handled the house. Respect eroded in small, daily moments, dismissive comments, sarcastic jokes at her expense, decisions made without her input. Sometimes it wasn't even anger, it was indifference, which hurt far more. She became an accessory in his life rather than a priority, someone expected to support his world without having one of her own. As his world expanded, hers shrank. He stayed out late with friends, chose business dinners over family meals, and there were whispers, texts hidden, calls taken in private, a name she pretended not to notice. Whether it was another woman or simply his ego, something else had taken her place. Each time she tried to speak, he brushed her off, accusing her of being dramatic or ungrateful. Still, she stayed. Not because she was weak, but because she was a mother. Every time she considered leaving, she looked at her son and told herself to endure a little longer. She learned to smile through disappointment, to swallow pain for the sake of stability. Yet beneath her quiet obedience, something else was growing: clarity. She began to observe, to plan, to prepare. She saved small amounts of money, kept important papers safe, and strengthened herself emotionally. While he believed she was trapped, she was actually gathering courage. The marriage hadn't broken on Christmas night. It had shattered piece by piece long before. She had simply waited for the moment when leaving would no longer feel like running away, but like choosing survival. Morning arrived quietly, wrapped in pale winter light. The husband woke with a dull smile, expecting the familiar sounds of Christmas morning. His son's laughter, the clatter of dishes, the smell of warm food drifting from the kitchen. For a moment, he lay still, convinced the silence was temporary. Then seconds passed, and nothing changed. He stepped out of bed and walked through the house, calling her name casually, without concern. His voice echoed back to him, unanswered. The living room was untouched, the Christmas tree still glowing softly from the night before, presents sitting exactly where they had been left. The warmth was gone. The air felt cold, heavy, unfamiliar. He moved toward his son's bedroom, a strange tightness forming in his chest. The bed was neatly made. The reindeer blanket folded. No toys scattered on the floor. No sign that a child had slept there at all. Panic crept in slowly, like ice spreading through his veins. He searched the bathroom, the kitchen, the hallway, each empty space deepening the dread he refused to name. Then he saw it. The wedding ring lay beneath the family photograph, exactly where it had been placed with intention. Beside it was a short note, written calmly, without accusation or pleading. He didn't need to read every word to understand. The absence said enough. For the first time, anger didn't rise. There was no shouting, no blaming. Instead, fear settled deep in his chest, raw and unfamiliar. Not fear of losing control, but fear of losing everything. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone, scrolling through unanswered calls, hoping this was some cruel misunderstanding. The Christmas decorations, once symbols of celebration, now felt like a cruel joke. The lights flickered without warmth, the ornaments reflected a man standing alone in a house that no longer belonged to him. Only then did it hit him, while he had been celebrating, she had been leaving. And by the time he noticed, it was already far too late. Panic turned into frantic action. He grabbed his phone and began calling everyone he could think of, her parents, her friends, distant relatives he barely remembered. Each unanswered call tightened the knot in his chest. When someone finally picked up and admitted they hadn't heard from her, his fear twisted into anger. How could she disappear without telling anyone? How could she do this to him? By noon, he was at the police station, struggling to keep his voice steady as he explained that his wife and son were missing. The officers asked calm, measured questions, but every pause felt like an accusation. When they suggested she may have left willingly, his face burned with humiliation. The idea that others believed she had chosen to walk away made him feel exposed, weak, and judged. Back home, messages flooded his phone. Guests from the night before whispered, questioned, speculated. Some offered sympathy, others barely hid their curiosity. The perfect image he had built, successful husband, respectable family man, began to crack in public. He imagined people talking behind his back, wondering what kind of man drives his wife away on Christmas night. That thought filled him with rage. He blamed her openly and often. She was selfish. She was dramatic. She had ruined Christmas for everyone. He convinced himself she had planned this to punish him, to embarrass him, to take control. Every retelling of the story made him the victim and her the villain. It was easier than facing the truth. What he refused to accept was his own reflection in the wreckage. He dismissed every memory of neglect, every ignored plea, every night he chose elsewhere over home. When guilt threatened to surface, he buried it under accusations. He told himself she was ungrateful, that she overreacted, that she would come crawling back once reality hit her. But she didn't. Days turned into weeks, and his carefully balanced life began to unravel. Friends stopped inviting him out, unsure what to say. At work, his focus slipped, mistakes piled up, patience vanished. He drank more, slept less, and lashed out at anyone who questioned him. The control he thought he had was slipping through his fingers. The more he searched, the more he lost himself. Without realizing it, his anger was no longer about finding them. It was about the growing fear that she hadn't just left the house. She had escaped him. For her, the world after that Christmas night was not freedom wrapped in relief, but survival wrapped in uncertainty. The moment she closed the door behind her, fear followed closely, whispering doubts with every step forward. Yet she kept walking, holding her son close, reminding herself that staying would have cost them far more than leaving ever could. Their new home was small, a modest apartment with thin walls and worn floors. It lacked warmth, luxury, and comfort, but it was safe. Every corner was filled with the quiet determination to start over. Money was tight. She counted every expense, skipped meals without complaint, and took work wherever she could find it. Nights were long, often lonely, but she refused to let her son see her exhaustion. In front of him, she remained calm, steady, unbreakable. The hardest part was not the physical struggle, but the emotional weight. Her son asked questions she didn't know how to answer. Why they couldn't go home, why his father wasn't around, why Christmas felt different now. She chose her words carefully, never poisoning his heart with anger or blame. She shielded him from the pain she carried, determined that he would grow up feeling loved, not torn between two broken adults. There were nights when loneliness crept in quietly, when the apartment felt too silent and memories returned uninvited. She missed the idea of what her life was supposed to be, not the man who failed to protect it. In those moments, she reminded herself why she left. Not out of spite, not for revenge, but because staying had been slowly destroying her sense of worth. She rebuilt herself piece by piece. Confidence replaced fear. Strength replaced doubt. She learned to stand alone without bitterness hardening her heart. Each small victory, paying a bill on time, hearing her son laugh freely, sleeping without tension, felt like reclaiming a piece of her dignity. She avoided the past with intention. Every missed call, every unknown number, every attempt at contact was ignored. Not because she wanted to punish him, but because reopening that door risked undoing everything she had fought to build. Silence became her boundary, and peace her priority. This new life was not glamorous, and it was never meant to be. It was honest. It was hard-earned. And for the first time in years, it belonged entirely to her and her son. Time moved forward quietly, reshaping lives in ways none of them could have predicted. For the boy, childhood unfolded with stability and warmth. He grew in a home where laughter wasn't forced and silence wasn't filled with fear. His mother became his constant, attentive, present, and emotionally available. He learned what safety felt like, what trust sounded like, and what love looked like in everyday moments. Without realizing it, he grew into a confident, kind-hearted child, untouched by the chaos left behind. His mother changed as well. The woman who once doubted herself became someone others admired. She built a life through perseverance, earning respect not by demanding it, but by embodying it. Independence gave her a quiet pride. She no longer needed permission to exist or validation to feel worthy. The past became a closed chapter, something acknowledged but no longer painful. She stood taller, spoke with clarity, and carried herself with the calm strength of someone who had survived and learned. Meanwhile, his world unraveled slowly. The husband moved through relationships that never lasted, each one ending the same way, with distance, dissatisfaction, and disappointment. He chased distractions, mistaking attention for connection, but nothing filled the absence his family had left behind. Success came and went, promotions and praise losing their meaning the moment the celebrations ended. Regret followed him like a shadow. In quiet moments, memories resurfaced. His son's laughter, her silent patience, the life he once had but never protected. The more he achieved, the emptier it felt. There was no one waiting at home, no small voice calling him dad, no sense of belonging. He had gained the world he wanted and lost the one that mattered. Unseen threads of fate tightened with each passing year. Different lives, different paths, but the past never fully releases its grip. Somewhere between missed chances and unspoken truths, the distance between them began to shrink. Neither knew when or how, only that time had been preparing them for a moment that could no longer be avoided, a collision between what was lost and what had been rebuilt. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind of moment fate chooses when no one is prepared. He was standing in the crowd at a local school event, surrounded by parents and children, half listening to announcements when a familiar laugh cut through the noise. His body reacted before his mind did. He turned slowly, and that was when he saw them. She stood a few steps away, older but unmistakable. Stronger somehow. Beside her was a boy, taller than he expected, shoulders straighter, eyes bright with confidence. For a heartbeat, he couldn't breathe. The child before him was no longer a memory or a photograph. He was real, alive, grown. His son. The shock hit hard. Years had passed, yet in his mind the boy had remained small, frozen in time. Seeing how much he had changed was like watching all the years he missed rush back at once. He searched the boy's face desperately, looking for recognition, for a sign. Anything that would confirm he was still remembered. But the boy looked straight through him. There was no hesitation, no curiosity, no flicker of familiarity. He turned back to his mother, smiling, tugging lightly at her hand, secure and at ease. That simple gesture hurt more than anger ever could. In that moment, he understood something devastating. He was a stranger. She noticed him then. Their eyes met briefly. There was no surprise in her expression, only calm awareness. She didn't freeze or flinch. She didn't shield the boy or confront him. Instead, she offered a polite nod, distant and controlled, as if acknowledging someone from a past life. Her posture was guarded, her presence firm, leaving no room for emotional chaos. Words failed him. Everything he had buried, regret, guilt, longing, rose to the surface at once. Memories he thought he had outrun caught up to him, heavy and relentless. The laughter, the silence, the night she left. All of it returned in a single, crushing wave. As she guided the boy away, he stood rooted in place, unable to follow. That brief encounter reopened wounds he never healed, forcing him to confront the truth he had avoided for years. Losing them hadn't been temporary. It had been permanent. And now, standing face to face with the life that moved on without him, he realized the price of that loss was far greater than he had ever imagined. Later that day, fate gave him what he thought he wanted, a chance to speak to her alone. Away from the crowd, away from curious eyes, they stood facing each other in a quiet corner, the distance between them heavy with years of unspoken words. His heart raced, emotions clashing inside him, but when he finally spoke, his voice came out sharp, demanding answers he believed he deserved. Why? He asked, as if the question itself could undo the past. Why she left? Why she took their son? Why she never came back? She listened without interrupting, her expression steady, unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, almost gentle, but every word carried weight. She didn't raise her voice or accuse him. She didn't need to. Truth, spoken quietly, was far more powerful. She told him Christmas night wasn't a sudden decision. It was the final moment in a long series of disappointments. The neglect. The loneliness. The way she became invisible in her own home. She explained how she waited, hoped, and tried to fix what he refused to see. How each broken promise chipped away at her until there was nothing left to hold on to. She spoke about their son, how staying would have taught him that love meant silence and endurance. How leaving was the only way to protect him from growing up in emotional coldness. Christmas wasn't chosen to hurt him. It was chosen because it was the night she finally understood she would never be chosen. There was no anger in her tone, only clarity. She told him she didn't leave to punish him. She left because she was disappearing, and staying would have meant losing herself completely. As she spoke, something inside him cracked. For the first time, he didn't interrupt or defend himself. The truth settled in slowly, painfully. He realized she hadn't taken their son away from him. He had pushed them both out long before that night. When she finished, silence filled the space between them. He stood there, exposed and emptied, understanding at last what he truly lost. Not just a family, but a woman who once loved him enough to stay far longer than she should have. The aftermath was harsher than he could have imagined. The law offered him a chance to see his son, but only under strict conditions. Visitation schedules, supervised meetings, and careful boundaries replaced the effortless presence he once took for granted. Every attempt to reclaim what he had lost reminded him that control was no longer his to command. Emotionally, the consequences were even heavier. His son looked at him with polite curiosity, not recognition. Hesitation lingered in every smile, every pause, every word spoken. Trust had to be earned, not assumed, and years of absence had created a distance that no apology could instantly erase. The boy's questions were careful, tentative, and each one cut deeper than any confrontation with her ever had. Morally, he faced the quiet judgment of his own conscience. For the first time, he confronted the truth. Love cannot be demanded, it cannot be coerced, and it cannot be reclaimed with anger or force. Every visit was a lesson in humility, every refusal a reminder of choices made too late. Regret became his lifelong companion. He replayed Christmas night endlessly, every forgotten promise, every ignored cry, every moment he chose convenience over connection. Success, wealth, and status were meaningless compared to the warmth of a son's embrace he could not fully claim. The price he paid was not monetary. It was the cost of a relationship that could never be fully restored, a family that could never return to what it once was, and the enduring knowledge that some losses are permanent, and some lessons arrive too late. The day ended as quietly as it began. She held her son's hand, guiding him through the bustling streets, the world around them moving at its usual hurried pace, oblivious to the weight of what had just passed. He watched them from a distance, the boy's small hand now firm and confident in hers, the woman he had once loved moving with calm determination. There was no confrontation, no last plea, no desperate grasping. She chose them, her son and her own future, without looking back. He remained still, unable to follow, a silent witness to the life that had moved on without him. He was changed, marked by regret and understanding, but alone. For the first time, he accepted that some losses are permanent. No legal rights, no excuses, no sudden epiphanies could restore what had been lost. Some doors, once closed, do not reopen. In that moment, he understood the depth of respect, patience, and timing. Love is fragile, but respect is its foundation. Timing, often overlooked, can determine whether hearts remain whole or shatter beyond repair. His failure had been not a lack of love, but a failure to honor, protect, and prioritize what mattered most. As she and their son disappeared into the winter evening, he finally exhaled, not in relief, but in recognition. The price of his absence was clear, and the lesson etched into every memory, every lost Christmas, every silent tear. He would carry it with him forever, a reminder that some choices cannot be undone, and some reunions are never meant to be. The world went on around him, indifferent, but he stood still, changed. Some stories end not with reunion, but with understanding, and sometimes, understanding is the only gift left. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Shattered Hearts Tales.